They were the queens of the silver screen, the faces that defined an era. Their names were whispered in admiration, their eyes sparkled on posters, their voices reverberated through the hearts of millions. They were the embodiment of beauty, talent, and allure, icons in a world that seemed to hold endless promise. But the glint of the camera faded, and the cheers from the crowd dimmed. The applause stopped, leaving only the echo of what once was. And for these actresses, whose legacy should have stretched across decades, time began to slip by, leaving them waiting for a comeback, waiting for a second chance to dazzle. But the chance never came. In their prime, they had it all: the recognition, the adoration, the love of millions. Yet the years, fickle as ever, turned their gaze away. New faces, new names filled the screens, while theirs grew dimmer in the corners of Hollywood's glittering halls. The world moved on. But those actresses, those stars, did not. They waited in silence, knowing their names would be forgotten by those who once adored them. Their roles grew fewer and further apart, and their beauty was left in the shadow of the young and the new. The war between public perception and private despair was never clear. The cameras captured their smiles, but behind those smiles was a yearning for something more, something not born of applause or adoration, but of respect and recognition. They wanted one more role, one more moment to shine, but the world had no more space for them. Their names stayed on the posters, but not on the lips of those they loved. They smiled for the camera and cried when it turned away. She was a flame that burned so brightly, so fiercely, that the world could not help but be drawn to her. She wasn't just a star, she was the first blonde bombshell, the embodiment of an era's ideal beauty. A name whispered in admiration, a face plastered across posters, her wide eyes radiating a seduction that was both pure and powerful. On screen, Jean exuded a raw, untamed allure, a brilliance that could not be contained. The world watched her every move, entranced by her magnetism, her radiance. But beneath that shimmering exterior, there was more than just the illusion of glamour. Jean longed for something far beyond the camera flashes, the adoration, and the applause. She wanted love, not the love of an audience, but the quiet, steady kind that promises stability in a world that always shifts. She wanted a life of peace, far from the hustle of Hollywood, far from the lights that blinded her to everything else. Yet fate played a cruel game. Jean's rise to stardom was swift, almost too fast, but her fall was just as rapid. At just 26, when most actresses were at their peak, Jean found herself struggling with more than just the roles that faded away. She fought with her health, plagued by a relentless illness that no one could cure. And with each passing year, the demands of the industry, the promises of fame, of power, grew heavier. She became caught between the myth of herself and the woman she longed to be. A woman not made of silver screen magic, but of frailty and longing. Her love life, too, was turbulent. Her marriages and relationships had been marred by disappointment, the kind that left bruises not visible to the eye, but deep within. She craved something simple: stability, love, and maybe, just maybe, a life where she could breathe without the pressure of public opinion. But Hollywood did not offer such luxuries. Instead, it fed off her vulnerability, pulling her back in, never letting her escape to the quiet she desired. Her final years were spent waiting for a comeback that never came, retreating into herself as the world moved on. Jean's beauty, once all-consuming, became a memory fading with the times. The glamour she once commanded was no longer enough to hold her place in an ever-evolving industry. As her health deteriorated, as her light began to dim, she found herself alone, unable to recapture the magic she once held. The cameras, though still present, no longer saw the same Jean Harlow. They saw only the echo of her former brilliance. Jean smiled for the camera, her signature smile that captivated millions. But behind closed doors, the smile hid a loneliness that could never be captured in a photograph. She was alone in a world that had once adored her, alone with the knowledge that the moment she had hoped for, a return to the spotlight, a moment to shine again, would never arrive. Her flame, though brief, still flickers in the hearts of those who remember her. Jean Harlow's legacy, now immortalized in films and photographs, is a symbol of a beauty that could never be replicated, of a star that burned so bright, so fiercely, but never lasted long enough to see the full arc of her career. Her name, once a household word, is now a whisper in the wind, a fading echo of an era that has long passed. But even in the silence of the years that followed her passing, Jean's flame still lingers in the stories shared by those who lived through it. She may have been a victim of a system that never gave her a chance to rest, but in the hearts of those who remember, she is not forgotten. The silent flame that was Jean Harlow still burns brightly, a symbol of beauty, brilliance, and the price of stardom. And though she never received the comeback she dreamed of, she remains unforgettable, forever. Veronica Lake was once the face of mystery and allure. She was more than just a star, she was an enigma wrapped in blonde curls, with eyes that beckoned from beneath a cascade of hair, as if hiding a secret no one could quite understand, but everyone was drawn to. In the 1940s, Veronica Lake became a symbol of glamour, a siren on the silver screen who captured the hearts of millions. With her famous peekaboo hairstyle, which shaded her eyes like a curtain of mystery, she exuded a tantalizing allure that promised stories untold, emotions unspoken. She was the starlet of the moment, destined for greatness, a name that seemed bound for immortality. But as quickly as she rose, she began to fade. The rapid ascent that had placed her among Hollywood's elite was followed by a fall that felt just as swift, if not more so. The roles that once poured in, each one a step higher in her climb, started to dry up. The offers became fewer. The camera that once adored her, that had captured her every move, immortalized her every smile, slowly turned its focus elsewhere. In a world that thrived on the next shining star, Veronica's flame began to flicker in the shadow of new faces, new talents, and new allure. Off-screen, the struggles Veronica faced were not those of a woman fighting to regain fame. They were more personal, more silent. Behind the scenes, her life became a tangled web of dissatisfaction, loneliness, and a longing for a return to a spotlight that had already moved on without her. Veronica found herself caught between the fleeting promises of fame, which always seemed just out of reach, and the crushing solitude that took hold when the world stopped watching. The solace she once found in the camera lens was now replaced by the overwhelming quiet of life off-screen. Veronica tried to recapture the magic, tried to regain what had slipped through her fingers, but the industry had moved on, leaving her in the past. The starlet who had once lit up the screen was now a forgotten beauty, a name whispered only by those who remembered her brief time in the sun. Her later years were spent in the shadow of what could have been. She longed for a return to the world that had once adored her, to the roles that had defined her and made her a household name. But the doors she had once walked through with ease were now closed, and the cameras that once followed her every move had turned their attention elsewhere. Veronica Lake's name became a footnote in a chapter of Hollywood history, a legacy of beauty and brilliance that was eclipsed too soon by the very industry that had once worshipped her. Her story is not one of scandal or downfall. It is one of missed opportunity, of a woman who was more than just a pretty face, who had the talent, the allure, and the drive to be one of Hollywood's greatest stars. And yet, despite her early success, her name slowly faded into obscurity. What remained was not the promise of what could have been, but the hollow echo of an opportunity missed. Veronica Lake, the woman with the hair that hid her secrets, the woman who captivated a nation, became a symbol of what Hollywood can take from its stars and what it leaves behind when it moves on. She was the forgotten beauty, beautiful in more ways than one, but forgotten all the same. Carole Lombard's laughter was infectious. It wasn't just the sound of it, it was the way it filled the room, the way it made everyone else laugh too. It was as if her joy had a life of its own, bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her, effortlessly infectious, spreading warmth wherever it went. Her comedic timing, flawless and swift, could transform even the simplest line into something brilliant. On screen, she was more than just a star, she was a force of nature. Her charm, her wit, her laughter, they illuminated the screen like a beacon, drawing everyone in and making them forget the world outside. She had the kind of radiance that could turn any film into pure magic. But behind that radiant smile, there was something else, something that only a few could see. Because Carole Lombard, as much as she gave to the world, carried a heart that had known both love and loss. She longed for something deeper than the applause, something more lasting than the adoration of fans. She sought a love that would fill the spaces between her laughter, a love that would hold her steady when the cameras weren't rolling. But love, for Carole, often slipped through her fingers. She gave herself wholeheartedly to the men she loved, but each time she found herself left behind. Her heart ached not for lack of affection, but for its fleeting nature. The men she loved often couldn't remain, their absence leaving her more alone than she had been before. Just as Carole reached the height of her career, just as she finally seemed to have everything she had ever worked for, a career that spanned the genres, a life that felt full of promise, fate took a cruel turn. In January of 1942, Carole died in a plane crash, a tragic and abrupt end to a life that was just beginning to bloom. She was only 33. The world that had adored her was left in shock, stunned by the suddenness of her passing. Her legacy, though brilliant, was left unfinished. There would be no more films, no more laughter, no more of the joy she brought to the screen. The world had lost one of its brightest stars, just as she was reaching her prime. Carole Lombard's life was cut short, a promise unfulfilled, a career incomplete. She had given everything, and yet so much was left unsaid. Her story is one of love, loss, and the fleeting nature of life itself. Carole, who had brought joy to millions, who had lightened even the darkest days with her humor, never had the chance to grow old in the public eye. She never had the chance to explore new roles, to evolve, to become something even greater than she already was. And in her passing, we were reminded of how fragile life truly is. The brightest lights burn the quickest, and sometimes even the most brilliant stars fade before they can reach their full potential. But her laughter still lingers. In the films she left behind, in the memories of those who loved her, Carole Lombard's spirit remains. Her joy, her infectious laugh, and the radiance she brought to the screen are not lost. They live on in the hearts of those who remember her, in the laughter she gifted to the world, and in the quiet spaces left in her absence. Carole Lombard's legacy, like her life, was cut too short. But even in the silence left behind, we are reminded of what might have been. Her story is one of beauty, of brilliance, and of the cruel brevity of time. And though she left us too soon, her laughter still echoes, a reminder that even the brightest flames can burn out too quickly, leaving only the memory of their light. Ava Gardner was the wild heart of Hollywood. She wasn't just an actress, she was a force of nature, a woman whose very presence in a room seemed to make the air crackle with energy, a woman whose beauty was undeniable but whose spirit was what truly set her apart. Ava lived for the moment, burning through life with a passion that was both captivating and at times destructive. In an industry that thrived on conformity, Ava Gardner was a defiant flame. Her gaze could smolder like fire, and her smile was both an invitation and a warning. She did not fit the mold Hollywood tried to place her in. She carved her own way, carving her name into the hearts of audiences around the world. But while her beauty was legendary, it was her heart that made her unforgettable. Ava loved fiercely, throwing herself into relationships and romances with the same intensity she poured into her work. She loved as deeply as she lived, with no apologies, no reservations. Yet this love was often at a cost. Each man she adored, each lover who captured her heart, left a mark on her soul. Whether it was her turbulent marriage to Frank Sinatra or her passionate liaisons with other men of Hollywood's golden era, her relationships seemed to be as fleeting as the moments of peace she sought. Her heart, torn between love and ambition, never truly found the solace it longed for. She gave pieces of herself to the men she loved, only to find that, in the end, they were never able to give her what she needed in return. Her career, though illustrious, began to fade as the years passed. The roles that once came easily began to dry up, and with each film that wasn't offered, her heart sank just a little more. Hollywood had once adored her, but now it seemed to leave her behind, as it moved toward a younger generation of stars. Despite this, Ava refused to conform. She never allowed herself to be molded into the demure, perfect image that the industry wanted. She was too much, too loud, too unapologetically her own. And while this independence made her a legend, it also kept her from finding the peace she longed for. Ava was never content to simply play a role. She wanted to be loved in a way that Hollywood could never provide. She wanted a love that was real, a love that would fill the spaces she had left open for so long. But as the years passed, that love seemed to drift further away. Her name remained on the lips of admirers, but it was the love she sought, the love that she had always poured into others, that remained out of reach. She lived fully, unapologetically, but there was always that quiet ache in her heart. The men, the fame, the beauty, none of it could fill that void. Ava Gardner's legacy is not just one of passion, not just one of a wild spirit that couldn't be tamed. It is the story of a woman who refused to fit into the roles that others wanted for her. A woman who lived with an intensity that was both a gift and a burden. She was a symbol of defiance, of strength, but also of vulnerability. She gave everything she had to love, to her work, to the world, but in the end it was love that remained elusive, always just out of her grasp. Her heart, wild and untamed, would never be able to rest. Even in her success, in her shining moments on screen, she was never truly at peace. Ava Gardner was the woman who could not be tamed. She was too fierce, too passionate, too much of a force to be boxed in by the constraints of fame and expectation. And that is why she remains unforgettable, not because of her beauty, but because of the strength and pain that lay beneath it. She is the symbol of a woman who lived fully, who loved with abandon, but who could never quite find the peace she so desperately sought. There are some faces that you remember forever, and Barbara Payton's was one of them. With wide eyes, full lips, and a look that could melt the camera lens, she had a beauty that seemed almost too perfect for this world, a face that could launch careers and capture hearts. Hollywood, as it always does with those destined to be stars, gravitated toward her. She was that rare thing, a woman who could light up a screen with little more than a glance. But what Hollywood didn't know, what no one saw in the gleam of her eyes, was the storm brewing just beneath the surface. For Barbara, fame came quickly, like a fire that burns too bright to last. She was the epitome of allure, of glamour, of everything the world dreamed of when it thought of stardom. Yet as fast as the cameras flashed, as swiftly as the red carpets unrolled before her, her life began to unravel. The roles, once abundant, began to dwindle. The calls from the studio started to stop. In place of offers came quiet, empty days, days filled with regret and silence. Her beauty, once the key to her success, began to fade too, but not in the way one might expect. It wasn't the passage of time that dimmed her glow. It was the weight of a life that was spiraling out of control. Alcoholism, scandal, and a string of failed relationships wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. Once the darling of Hollywood, Barbara found herself lost in the shadows, isolated from the industry that had once adored her. The limelight that had illuminated her once vibrant path had dimmed, leaving her alone, her name only whispered by those who remembered the magic she once held. Barbara's story is one of beauty, yes, but it is also a story of brokenness, of a woman whose potential was as undeniable as her looks, yet who could never quite grasp it. The world admired her from afar, but Barbara was haunted by an emptiness she could not fill, a desire for love, for stability, for something beyond the surface. And so, her life became one of unfulfilled potential, a story of what might have been, a brilliant star eclipsed too soon, before she could fully stretch her wings and show the world what she was capable of. Her name is still remembered by those who recall the beauty she once had, the magic she once created with just a glance or a smile. But her legacy is forever tied to the tragedy of her untimely fall, of the woman who had everything, but who could not hold on to it. Barbara Payton's beauty will never be forgotten. It is immortalized in the stills, in the films, in the memories of those who remember the magic she once brought to the screen. But her life, so full of promise and so filled with potential, serves as a quiet reminder of the fleeting nature of fame, a reminder that even the brightest stars can burn out before they ever truly get the chance to shine. These 7 actresses were more than just stars. They were the heart of Hollywood, the women who defined an era, who shaped the dreams of a generation. Their beauty, talent, and grace captivated the world, making them icons that became synonymous with glamour, passion, and allure. But time, as it does with all things, passed. The world that once adored them moved forward, its gaze shifting to new faces, new stars who could embody the next era of dreams. The roles they once played, the parts they fit into so perfectly, began to vanish from the stage. Hollywood, fickle and ever-changing, no longer had a place for them, and so they waited. They waited for the next role, for the call that would bring them back to the spotlight, for the moment when their beauty and talent would once again be acknowledged. But that moment never came. The industry had moved on, leaving them to watch from the shadows. Their comebacks were never meant to be. The door that had once opened to them was now closed, and they were left to linger in the echoes of their past. The world seemed to forget the names that once graced billboards and marquees, the faces that had been adored in every home. Their stories, once filled with triumphs, became quiet whispers, half remembered by those who still held them dear. In the silence of their waiting, they were forgotten. The films they starred in, the moments they brought to life on screen, faded into the background. But even as the world turned its attention to the next generation, something of them remained. Their stories are a bittersweet reminder of the fleeting nature of fame. It is a world where the brightest stars can burn out too quickly, where the promise of forever is broken by time's relentless passage. They were loved and adored, their names synonymous with grace and beauty, yet in the end they were left in the shadows of their former selves. The roles that made them famous were no longer offered, and the lights that had once shone so brightly now flickered dimly. They had given everything, but in return they received only silence. They may have died waiting for a comeback, but they will forever live in the memories of those who adored them. Their stories, once shining brightly on the silver screen, may have faded with time, but they will never fade from the hearts of those who were touched by their magic. Even in the quiet, in the waiting, in the shadows, their legacy endures. They were the women who shaped an era, and though the spotlight has moved on, their light continues to flicker in the hearts of those who remember.